He said, what's your name? I said, my name's Joe. He says, all day, an angel said to me, you need to go to that place. You will meet a man called Joe. I said, well, you come to the right place then.
Welcome back to Strange Normal. My name is Brad Burnham. We talk about the strange events that happen in your normal life to give you a biblical understanding of what is going on around you. And there's going to be a lot going on around you soon. So you should hit that subscribe button, hit the little bell notification so that you are notified when things like this happen. And we've got an amazing show tonight, something very interesting from Dante. Dante, he's got a fascinating story about how he came to know the truth about these things and how it turned his life upside down. And before we get started with Dante tonight, if you find this information important and valuable, please consider contributing in the links in the description. Now let's get right into it. Dante, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I'm from the UK and I'm a psychotherapist, and I have been a Christian for over 20 years. My travel, my adventures, my journey have taken me from the UK to Europe to the USA. Now currently I'm in Asia. So I've been running my own private practice as a therapist. Now I'm out here in Asia doing likewise. I would like to imagine that the walk that I've had, the experience that I've had, is available to all those who walk with Christ. One of my favorite scriptures is, and Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him. So it's like when you walk with God, when you know God, then you'll see things, then you'll do things. But it wasn't always that way with me. It was a learning curve, and also having to walk with those that would teach me and edify me to see that God is here. He's not out there leaving his answer machine on, that he's very alive and present, and the things that Christ did can also do, which takes a bit of renewal of mind. However, I'd like to stress out, it's not that we should pursue signs and wonders. Signs and wonders follow us, but ultimately it needs to be a walk of love, because without love it's absolutely pointless. Yeah, but my adventures, my journey, walking with Christ, I've seen many amazing things. I mean, with God, there is no supernatural. It's just natural, just like breathing oxygen. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I've seen a few things.
So tell me, where did you come from, and how did you get there? I guess is the broad scope of things. But you came. Tell us at first a little bit more about where you came from.
In terms of walking with the Lord, well, my parents are from Sicily. Well, my mum's with the Lord now, but they're from Sicily. They emigrated to the UK back in the 60s. So growing up in the UK, I was a child that didn't really fit in. I was too Italian for the English, too English for the Italian. So I always felt a bit like an alien. Now, my grandparents were in the war, and my grandparents, or my granddad and my nonna, kind of brought me up. But my granddad had PT, a post-traumatic stress disorder from some of the things he saw in the war, and some of those things overspilled generationally into my mother's life. When they came here, my nonna and my mother were in a road accident. And all that sort of trauma was never really dealt with. And growing up as a young man, I experienced a rupture, a breaking in the relationship between myself and my family. And over the course of time, I wanted to connect. I wanted to feel a love, but I couldn't get close to the people that loved me. and the people that I loved. There was this tear, and in its place, I sought off-worldly comfort, and primarily that being in the subject of ufology, which really seduced me, which really fascinated me. It's almost like I wanted it to rescue me. See, the challenge is with all of humanity, we live in a traumatic world, and people or Christians are looking for the rapture, and I get that. But we need to deal with the rupture first, where the trauma comes, which is a wound. Somewhere in scripture, it says, by his wound, we are healed. There's no, we're all waiting for this. Many people are waiting to be rescued, but Christ has come. And the more we walk with him, the more we understand his love, the more we access what is available to us. Now, in my journey, when I was young, I think I was about 8 years old, I was sitting at a table with my close friends. I remember them all: Enzo, Asid, Mustafa, Colin, Sam, and we were all talking about a second Noah's Ark coming from the sky to rescue us. Now, at that young age, having experienced racism, never really fitting in the UK or in school, and having that traumatic upbringing, it soothed me, thinking, oh, okay, in order to be rescued, I need to be good. In order for my friends to come on board, we need to be good. And from there on, things would in the future escalate. Now, what does that look like? Well, I went to secondary school. Things did not improve. They didn't get better. I had a lot of bullying. I had more racism. I had more confusion, low self-esteem. And one day let me see, I must have been about 13. There was a couple of teenagers that came into the classroom after having come home or come to school from lunch, and they were excited because they did the Ouija board.
Oh, wow.
And they had gathered a crowd together of young people, and they were sharing their story of what they had seen. Now you could feel this tangible presence in the classroom as they shared the things that they'd seen, the things that they heard. It was kind of eerie. I remember one young girl at the front whose name was Felicia. She said, I want nothing to do with that. But me having this fascination when I was young to want to learn about ufology and thereof, I asked the two students, James and Perry, I said, James, Perry, next time you do this, could you please ask them a question? And the question was, do aliens really exist? From there on, I opened the door. I'll pause it there if you have more questions, but the plot does thicken later on.
That's a really fascinating question, not only for just because it's interesting, but also because of the deception that could follow behind it. I'm very interested, not necessarily to know their answer, because anything that comes from them could lead to all kinds of stuff, but I'm fascinated by how your story progressed. Please keep going.
So from a young age, wanting to feel soothed, to have a connection, I must go back a bit.
Sure.
So I was brought up a Catholic. My mother, she would take me to Catholic church. She'd take my younger brothers. She also bought me one of these giant colorful Bibles, a children's first color Bible. I remember it had the picture of Samson pulling down on the pillars. It had the picture of Jesus walking on water. You know, these were fascinating stories. There was a mix there. I did believe as a young child, but because of this tear, because of this trauma, because of some of the stuff that had happened to me when I was young, it kind of confused me a bit. Now, jumping forward from secondary school where I asked James and Perry, next time you do the Ouija board, could you ask them a question? And they said, yes, we will. Of course, this stuff is deceptive. It's lies. You know, people with an open mind will often let in the wrong things. And as a young child, I continue to let in the wrong things. Now, I left secondary school. I was a postman for a brief while, or a postal cadet, a messenger delivering letters in my local area. And after a year, I went to work in London. I became a Lloyd's messenger. Now, Lloyd's is one of the biggest insurers, if not the biggest insurer in the world. They insure space shuttles, the Queen's jewels. They insured Michael Jackson. They insure all manner of things and people. But I was a Lloyd's messenger, and I would deliver letters. I would deliver money throughout all the great banks of London, and I would be driven in a black cab. I was dressed up, suited and booted. I looked the part. I was a handsome young man now that I look back in the photos, but back then I didn't really believe that I was, because I still carried the scars that hadn't been dealt with. So after 5 years of being a Lloyd's messenger, I entered into a relationship. Me and my then partner, we had a son. And my firm moved from the East End of London into the area of Docklands. I don't know if you've heard of it. And it's near Canary Wharf, where the triangle building flashes with its beacon. And the surroundings were not big enough or accommodating for 4 postal messengers. It would only be enough for 2. So I could see redundancy looming. Now, one day I picked up the paper, and as you do, I read a story about a man had placed a bet that in Scotland, Elvis would be found alive, having crashed a spaceship on the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh man, he's got every single story in there, huh?
I know, it was hilarious. And I shared the story with my work colleagues, and we all laughed. But then the inner child within me sprouted the wrong sort of crop circle, and I envisioned, hey, why doesn't somebody do an abduction insurance? Does such a thing exist? Who knows? And I put pen to paper with my knowledge of insurance, or the little knowledge that I had from reading the documents when we opened the mail. And I crafted a certificate which said the world's first certificate of it against being abducted by aliens. I went to the managing director with the proposal. I said, look, I've got this great idea. It will give you great publicity. And what would you be interested? He said, no. Now, I was very familiar with the subject, obviously growing up, studied some of the phenomena, the backstories. So it was an interesting way for me to promote the subject. I'd become an agent. I'd become one of the people that promote this nonsense. Or was it nonsense? Well, the plot thickens. After creating the certificate, I couldn't find a backer. I couldn't find anyone who was interested in giving me the connections that I needed. So I went to Ladbrokes betting shop. I don't know if they have a Ladbrokes out there in the USA, but it's a bookies, a betting shop. And I asked them, what odds would you give me for giving you evidence of extraterrestrial beings or whatever?
Yeah.
And they said, well, we have something for you. We have odds at 240 to 1. If the United Nations or the UK Prime Minister confirm the existence of aliens, then we will pay you. So what I did, I put some money out, I bought the slip, and in my mind, I kind of figured I had the cover that I needed should I ever make a claim. And then I began to promote the certificate. I picked up the phone, phoned up my local newspaper. I told them the story. And a couple of days later, they made it front page of North London with the article, the title, UFO policies go on sale. Now you can imagine that the media interest really took off after that, and it did. Now, I had promoted the certificate in the Fortean Times and Paranormal magazines, and a back column of the, I think it was the New York Inquirer. I can't remember, one of these US papers.
So,
and
you kind of worked this from the back end and brought it front show, because at first I was thinking, how in the world are you going to convince your higher ups to do this without anyone coming forward with all this stuff? Well, you explained that, and how are you going to show the statistics that there is this amount of people that are willing to buy this insurance? Number two, and that's really fascinating. And so what you did, you went from the back end and said, you know what, I'm going to go into the papers and show that this is available, and then people will start talking about it, and then maybe it'll become front and center. Very interesting. Keep going. I'm curious how this is going.
So I would tell the paper and the radio and the TV, look, there's apparently over 2 million people in the USA that claim that they have been abducted or had some kind of experience. So unbeknown to me, at the same time that this was released, Independence Day had come out in the UK. That film with Will Slap Smith, and it kind of generated more publicity. Now, this is where things start to get weird. Now, bear in mind that the inner child within me, that question that I'd asked at secondary school, that comfort that I saw at primary school, that trauma that had never been dealt with, almost send a beacon out, like a calling card. Now, when it made front page and when it went on the radio, I had some phone calls from members of the public who invited me to meet with them. And I met with some people from Waltham Abbey, an area in Essex. And I met these old ladies, and they shared their story. They invited me to their house, and they shared their stories of what happened in Swindon, Wiltshire in 1960. And they told me that this silver saucer had landed in their area, that there was a hum, that no one was scared, hundreds of people were witnessing it, and all the dogs had been completely silent up until this thing landed. And there was a whistling sound, and then a dog chased it and it shot off in the air. It came and cordoned off the area. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. To me, that was a jigsaw piece in my quest. I thought, this is amazing. I've never witnessed somebody or met anyone who had seen this. And from there, the jigsaw pieces began to gather. I met more people, and it just fed me into the quest that I had. Like a few months later, I met an insurance maverick, a very famous person who was doing insurance on mad cow disease, put it that way.
Okay.
And we got together, and I'm creative, always have been, still am. But back then, my creativity was misaligned to promote, in the words of St. Paul, scubalon. And we got together, and he said to me, right, let's join forces. Let's make this story go big, because I want the publicity and you want to sell the certificates. Yeah, fine, no problem. And within a couple of phone calls, we'd gone to Reuters and we'd syndicated the story where a Joseph T. Carpenter has taken out a policy just in case he is taken away by aliens. Now, Joseph T. Carpenter was an investigator, somebody who knew the subject, somebody who goes out on sky searches with friends. And he was interviewed because the media love a good story. Why would anyone take out a policy against being abducted by aliens?
So
now, on the back of it,
was Joseph T. Carpenter, was he a real person?
Joseph T. Carpenter was a pseudonym. He was a real person. He was also a person interviewed for taking out poltergeist insurance. And the media came to interview Carpenter. Why did you take out insurance against poltergeists? And Carpenter would explain that he had seen ghosts, that he was a person who also went out on ghost hunts. And he's also taken out alien abduction insurance. Now, what the world didn't know was that Carpenter was me.
Gotcha. Okay.
And Carpenter was, in fact, Dante, who had created the policy to begin with. But listen, when you start lying, when you start inviting these things in, that's just bad company. So going back to Carpenter, who was interviewed as to why he would take the policy out, he explained that as an investigator, as a UFO hunter, should he ever be abducted, it would be a great payout. At the same time, Carpenter is meeting all these journalists, other people that have had experiences, and it's feeding into the story of my childhood. Giving me more jigsaw pieces.
And they're telling you all about their experiences with this this supernatural demonic activity.
Well, I became essentially the world's first paranormal insurance investigator. So they're telling me all their stories. Now, what I forgot to mention is that my granddad, from his post-traumatic incidences in the war, he was a prisoner in Russia. He was allegedly taught by someone in his village to make things levitate in his house. He had some occultic background.
Wow.
But he gave his life to Christ in 1998. Praise God. So when he passed away on Christmas, he opened his eyes. But so yeah, going back to these people sharing their stories, it was frightening. But at the same time, I felt this conviction. I remember Felicia, the girl at secondary school, saying, I want nothing to do with this. This is wrong. And also being brought up Catholic, there was this faith that I had, but it was convoluted with this nonsense that I'd opened the door to. Now, Carpenter shared his story about taking out insurance. Now, meanwhile, I continued to work with the insurance maverick. We made vampire insurance, werewolf insurance.
Wow.
We went on TV. We were asked, well, what would you do if someone claimed they were a werewolf? And I said, well, we will place them in a cage when there's a full moon and have silver bullets on standby. And with their permission, we would shoot them. Now, these were some of the jokes that we were this is a divine here, but you know, things got a little bit darker along the way. Along the way, meeting more journalists, I met a demon-possessed photographer, stroke journalist, who shared his stories of having seen things in Mexico, having explored all the phenomena that he and his friends had videoed concerning lights in the sky, UFOs. They weren't called UAPs then. And for me, that was absolutely fascinating. He even promised to hire me as a photographer as a side project. Now, I know I'm jumping, it's called free association. I probably need to slow down.
This is fascinating. No, it's really interesting.
By that time, I had been made redundant. By the time Carpenter had come along, before Carpenter had come along, I'd been made redundant as predicted, prophesied. Oh, I forgot to mention something. Now, when I made the certificate, I commissioned an artist, a professional oil artist, to paint me 2 canvases. One was a canvas of a picture of the grey alien, that ugly thing, that reptilian thing, that piece of crud, right? Metamorphosizing into a human.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was an oil painting, number 1, and that was called Metamorphosis. Now, the second picture, I asked the artist to paint a picture of a Kurt Cobain-looking man being lifted up by a beam of light into the sky. Okay, with just the tip of the sword. Now, when the oil painting came back, the metamorphosis, you can see the grey in 3 stages, 4 stages, turn into a man. And the second picture looked like Jesus. You know, that kind of hands being lifted up, an ascension type looking picture. I even foolishly in the future went to promote it as the second coming of Christ in occasional interviews when I said, well, you never know, Jesus might come in a spaceship. What a silly person I was. So that was then. So now, jumping forward, I've been made redundant and my father had got me a job on night shift. I was making lights in the night for General Electric. And that was a place where the humbling would begin. But meanwhile, the story, the divine comedy, or the divine heresy, divine delusion, continued. Where Carpenter, who had taken out the insurance, along with my maverick insurance friend, we decided to take things a step further. So we were invited to a studio in Northampton. And in the studio, I was to be interviewed, or Carpenter was to be interviewed. Why did you take out insurance against alien abduction? But by this time, I was bored. Yes, I'd gleaned information. Yes, I'd interviewed people when I wasn't Carpenter. But now Carpenter decided to liven the stakes up and say, not only had he been abducted by a triangle star-shaped object, but it was witnessed by 3 friends, and it was video, caught on video, me being lifted up, or Carpenter being lifted up. And on that, in the craft, was a giant greenhouse. Now, bear in mind, this story, I've never shared this before. That particular story of being in this greenhouse with vegetation for hundreds of miles around in this dome-like structure was something that had been given to me by one of the people I'd interviewed when they wanted a policy. So for me, it just ingrained itself in my mind, and I blended it in with the story of Carpenter. Now, when Carpenter was on this triangle star object, a grey approached him and he had a camera lapel which was able to film this creature. And the creature spoke to him telepathically. Carpenter lashed out, and in lashing out, he was able to get a claw, some DNA from the creature, and then he ascended back down again. Now, apparently, when he came down again, 2 hours of time had passed, and only 15 minutes of footage or 15 minutes of Earth time had taken place. And that story was released in a studio in Northampton. My goodness me, hell broke loose. You can imagine. Bear in mind that the insurance maverick said, we have in our possession DNA evidence that's to be sold to NASA in the highest bid, and we're looking at this, and it's a case that is very strong. You know, stuff like that. I can't remember the narrative he used, but
and so this was a story that was made up by you, or this is something that you heard?
Well, Carpenter made the story up, but bear in mind, me, Joe Dante, had been the insurance investigator, blending these stories together, and all of a sudden to take the joke further regarding the insurance policy, we made it a fact. Yeah. We made it, and it made the front page of the New York Journal of Commerce. It made the front. It made Christmas Day TV news on Sky. Wow. It made the world. It just basically said insurance magnate has paid out policyholder based on evidence, and he's been given £1 million check, which is to be presented by Gillian Anderson of the X-Files theme. I remember Gillian Anderson on NBC was interviewed by Jay Leno and said, apparently you're supposed to be giving £1 million check to an abductee. And she says, they have that now? Apparently I am, but my agent hasn't told me. Now, this way, I'm hanging out with a demon-possessed journalist who is telling me his stories, introducing me to the world of the media, introducing me to backstage passes at festivals, at Glastonbury, meeting and photographing people like the Prodigy, Placebo, yada, yada, yada. Now, at that time, Carpenter, who was alleged to have been abducted, was still giving lots of interviews. A journalist comes to interview Carpenter, and this journalist is called Tim Leach, who used to be a BBC war correspondent. And he'd been to places like, I think it was Iraq, Iran, I'm not quite sure when. But he then began to share a story with me that in 1994 or 96, I can't remember, he went to a school in Zimbabwe, and he'd interviewed over 150 children who had seen this, and they had interaction with these greys. Now, when he shared that story, he said it was a story that had terrified him, regardless of his travels throughout the world in seeing war. This story scared him the most. Now, this story absolutely convinced me, convicted me, and also connected with me of my own inner child exploring, wanting to be saved by space daddies, wanting to be comforted. Now, to me, that was another jigsaw piece. Absolutely fascinating. Hang on, children, 150 of them had seen this silver craft land, and they had interaction with the telepathic beings. To me, it was like, wow, I have found what I'm looking for. Boom, boom, boom.
Wow. So tell me, before you continue, tell me a little bit more about that. You said he was a demon-possessed journalist. How did you know he was demon-possessed?
Okay, going back to not Tim Leach, not him. There was another guy who took me to the festivals. I would just call him Al. How did I know he was dealing with this? Because he was telling me stories of incubus and succubus and how he had interaction with spirits of a libido way, let's put it that way. And even when I heard those stories, I thought, yuck.
Yeah. So he had interaction with this dark side that that you hadn't heard of before, or you had been talking about, but hadn't had the actual experiences he had had. In other words.
No, I was not familiar with the terms incubus and succubus. Then these are spirits that visit people and seduce them in the night. Nevertheless, these things, no doubt, are transferable, and spirits can jump. You know, flies will not land on a hot plate, and I was not hot, for Christ. Yeah. So that was that world, and then shortly after, I met another journalist, Tim Leach, who I just mentioned. I'm not saying he was possessed, but his story was one that he was an atheist, but yet the story of what happened in Zimbabwe, Ruwa, in this Christian school of all places. How dare they land in this Christian school? That has outraged me, but I'll get to that later. And it just cemented what I'd been looking for in my quest for the subject, the knowledge. You know, they're going to rescue us. They're warning us about the future. Then that escalated into being invited onto a show called the Maurizio Costanzo Show in Rome, which was the equivalent of the Oprah Winfrey Show. Big show, massive show in Rome. So Carpenter, that was I, and my friend, were invited to appear on this show in Rome to tell Carpenter's story about the DNA evidence, the camera evidence being paid out $1 million. So they invited me over. You know, I was put on the show there. I'm a soldier who told me his story. It's like, wow, everyone I'm meeting seems to have had an encounter. I haven't, but it was feeding into the thing that as a child I'd wanted to, you know, to find answers to. And on that show, I publicly declared to all of Italy the story. We pretty much convinced the whole audience that we had evidence. We'd sold it to NASA, or there was a bidding war between scientists. And at the same time, just remember, there was a guy from Canada, a scientist from Canada who phoned me. He was a researcher, and he was begging to see the evidence. He would give me whatever money just to see this evidence, because he was studying abduction, you know. And when he pleaded with me, all that did was fed into my own curiosity as to what these things were. And I asked him, well, what is it that you found? Before I invite you over to meet Carpenter, what is it you found? And he said, well, we found an implant. You know, there's many research, as a researcher, this topic is something that has evidence-based. But I at that point just told him the truth. Look, we fabricated this. Mm-hmm. This isn't true. And he wouldn't take no for an answer. He would not take no for an answer. And then I asked him a question. I said, look, is it true that because many of the people that I'd interviewed had said to me, oh, we are waiting for the great disclosure. We are waiting for the great unraveling and the governments of the world to release the information, yada, yada, yada. And I said, well, be that as it may, what news have you got for me? And he said, I said, is it true that they're coming? He said, you need to live the life that you need to live. You know, there was some seriousness behind him. But upon reflection now, that's another person who seems to have swallowed a lie. Well, we get to that later. So jumping back to Italy, I'm in Rome. I'm drinking the best Chianti, I'm eating the best venison, and I'm telling the best story ever known to mankind as regards to alien evidence. And the world, his brother and his mother are lapping it up. And meanwhile, I've become an embarrassment to my own family. And by this time, with my involvement with demon-possessed journalists, dodgy affiliates, bad company corrupts. I can't remember the rest of that saying, but bad company corrupts, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Bear in mind, I was in a relationship. We had a son together, and then things really went bad. I remember it was 1997, and after a year and a half of being involved in this promotion of deceit, in this promotion of darkness, in interacting, I met vampires on the set of a TV show called The Y-Files. Not literal vampires, but people that sharpened their teeth and drank one another's blood. You know, call them vampires. There's just a weird world out there. Now, yeah. with my association with all these esoteric entities and communication, I was in a bad place. Now, I remember 1997, my mum, my dad, they said, look, you've got to get your son christened. Get your son christened. He's not christened. All right, I'll get him christened. Okay. We took him to a Church of England church. Now, in North London, the particular area that I grew up in, I'm not going to mention, is quite famous for wrong things. One, it had the Green Street poltergeist, the most famous poltergeist in all the world, Green Street poltergeist. Two, Boris Karloff grew up there, who later became Frankenstein. And then three, you had Carpenter, who was the alien abductee. Mm-hmm. So we go to the Church of England to christen our son. And there was I believe he was Ghanaian, a Ghanaian priest. And he said, do you repeat this prayer after me? And it was, do you renounce the works of Satan? I renounce the works of Satan. Do you renounce darkness and all esoteric ways, I think? Yes, I renounce darkness, and I renounce all his works, and I renounce. Do you accept the Lord Jesus Christ to look after you, to guide you, and to look after your son? I'm paraphrasing, but I said, yes, I do. I do renounce the works of Satan, and I do commit my son to Jesus Christ, born of a virgin, born of Mary, come from heaven to earth, yada, yada, yada. And I remember meaning it, absolutely meaning it. And then we went, they christened our son, 2 years old. We went home. A week later, we were watching, my partner and I were watching Forrest Gump. And we'd seen Forrest Gump before at the cinema. And there was this scene where Forrest had discovered that he had a son, and his partner had gone away. And I just began to cry. And I never cried because I was hard then. And then my girlfriend at the time said, oh, you're crying. And I said, go away. I don't love you anymore. So that was the end of our relationship, pretty much. 40 days after renouncing Christ and committing our son to the Lord, 40 days later, we split company. And it was the best thing that could have happened for her and my son, because I was not a good dude. I was lost. I was in darkness. And at the same time, I began working night shift, making fluorescent lamps. And when she left, I remember going to night shift and then coming back home in the day, and there was a house with the scent of perfume, and there was toys around, but my family had gone. It devastated me, it broke me, it sickened me. In the living room was the picture of the ascended Kurt Cobain, stroke Christ, being lifted up in the middle of the mantelpiece. There was posters, there were certificates all around. There were videos, newspaper clippings. What the hell had I spent my life on? Thousands of pounds on nonsense, neglecting my family, promoting crap, promoting nonsense, delusion, deception. You know, trauma seeks comfort. Trauma seeks comfort, and trauma sought the wrong thing. And then my mum came round. We took all the belongings. We took all the paraphernalia, thousands of pounds. We went in the garden and we burnt it. And those pictures, you could hear them scream. It could be the linseed oil, but it was symbolic of a scream. But these things screamed out air when we burnt them. And I went to night shift, and I, as a quality controller for General Electric USA, I said, God, forgive me for everything that I've done. I had flashbacks going back to many, many years of the things I've done wrong. I said, Father, forgive me. Forgive me. If you're out there, please, Christ Jesus, please. I've done wrong. Look what my family have gone. Jesus. I said that prayer, and I went out to have a cigarette in the smoking room. So I went to have a cigarette in the smoking room, and as I entered, my colleagues, also on the night shift, were speaking about Jesus. And I found it odd because I'd just been praying to Jesus, and these guys are talking about him. And all I heard, there was this black man in the corner. And they were saying, oh, it was the Romans that killed Jesus. And then another guy said, no, it was the Jews. And then this black man, who had not seen before, he was a temporary worker, he'd just come in for the evening or the night. And he said, no, you killed him, we killed him. We killed Jesus. And they began to swear and cuss and shout. Yeah. And then they all walked out one by one until this guy called Stephen, who I would later name Legion, for obvious reasons I won't go into, said, who do you say Jesus is, Joe? And I said, nothing, until it was me and this black man in the corner. And as this black man went to walk out, I grabbed his arm and I said, I need your help. Everything that you just said now, I want to know, because I'm going through hell. His name was Emmanuel. God with us. He was from Ghana, a trainee pastor. And he began to speak into my life. And then he began to speak to me about this Jesus. And throughout those 2 days, I stuck to him like glue as he spoke about Christ. Christ forgives, and Christ loves, and Christ is alive. And one particular night, as he spoke, I felt this stuff fall upon me from head to toe, and it was like, I got it, I understood. I felt like a baby chick hatching out the egg. I'm like, Mama, Papa, Jesus, I found you. And if no one else believes in you, I do, because I get it. I had an encounter with the living Christ. It just whatever terminology you want to use. Yeah, I've got the terminology now, but I didn't have it then. I just felt love just land from head to toe. It was beautiful. So that was my encounter with Christ. I went to church with Emmanuel for 6 months. I thought I was the only I was the only white guy in the black church. I thought I was the only charismatic there. But it was beautiful. And that was back in '98. I wish I could tell you that life gets easier, but the bee will sting and the dog will bite.
Yes.
Everything was going fine. You know, I would go to church. I joined an Elim church. Over the course of time, I wrote dramas. I did ministry. I used to preach. I used to teach. I used to do Sunday school. I did many, many things, and I was grateful for the opportunity. I used to go to New Age events and wizards and all those that did tarot. I used to give them the gospel. And just as I was kicked out of this event, a man walks to the door and he looks disturbed. He's looking left and right, up and down. I said, what are you looking for? He said, can you help me? I said, yeah, of course I can. Let's go for a little walk. There's a bar over there because it was in a hotel, and the hotel had a bar. I said, sit down. What's the problem? He said, you won't believe this, but these greys, these aliens are with me. I said, okay. He pulled out his phone and he showed me these orbs that he'd taken pictures of. I said, yeah, okay, big deal. Well, you've come to the right place. Let me tell you about Jesus.
Wow.
And I told him Christ crucified, Christ resurrected, Christ ascended, Christ coming back, and how he wants to set him free. I prayed for this man. I laid hands on him. And there was this wrestling for 20 minutes. And he says, this triangle-headed creature he could see. I said, don't worry about that. There's angels here in Jesus' name. There's a legion of angels. You don't have to worry about nothing. And he felt the presence of God upon him. He said a prayer, led him into the standard prayer, Jesus accepted, and so on. And he said, what's your name? I said, my name's Joe. He says, all day, an angel said to me, you need to go to that place. You will meet a man called Joe. So well, you come to the right place then.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And so you met this guy where?
I met him at a New Age event as I was kicked out. He'd gone there to seek help, and no doubt they would have just fortified his encounters, and they would have made light of it or embedded it in the narrative of his own trauma. But Jesus had other plans, and the timetable to coincidence was that we'd meet and he'd know the truth. The truth would set him free. I didn't pay any attention to what was on his phone, the photos. I didn't entertain the fact that he was being pestered by spirits or demons. No, I ain't got time for that. The name of Jesus is the name above all names. Every knee shall bow, every tongue confess to the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. So push off whatever you are. And so that's what I used to do.
Wow. That's amazing. And so from then on out, you've your focus was leading people more to Christ and getting them away from this deception, which you were involved in at one time.
Well, the world, to one degree or another, is under one mass deception. We only have to look at the current state of affairs that we are in now, with pandemics and plandemics, and I won't say where, but recently 17 million people got locked away in the name of a flu. But I want to see, Christ wants to see people set free from delusion, from deception, And another thing I want to share, right? I mentioned this at the beginning, right? Now, many of us, many Christians, whatever one's belief of pre, mid, post, I ain't got a clue, okay, about the rapture. Now, I've got a question for you, Brad, and many other believers out there. When was the first rapture? Pop quiz.
For humans, you mean when Christ was taken up, or when he took up a select few of that came out of the grave?
No, I'm talking about the law of first mention. When?
Oh, Enoch.
Enoch. Okay, you're very close. You're very close. I thought it was Enoch at the beginning. I said, and Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him. The words for Enoch took, God took, is laquak in Hebrew. I know it sounds funny, but you can look it up. Laquach, laquak. So God, laquak, God took, God rapture, Enoch. I love this bit. I'm like, they've missed this. The first rapture, you can look it up, was the rib of Adam. God took, God laquak, the rib of Adam, and shaped it and formed it into Eve. Now, the reason I mention that is we speak about escape and we speak about soothing. I get that we as Christians, as believers, want to be rescued and the coming of the Lord. He's coming back, absolutely, get that. But before the rapture, there needs to be the healing of the rapture, the rapture. How do I spell that? R-U-P-T-U-R-E. I'm a therapist now. I'm a counselor. There needs to be a healing. There's no point waiting, Jesus, take me now. Because somewhere in the book of Romans, it says, the earth eagerly awaits for the sons of God to be revealed. Why? The earth was subjected to frustration in the hope that the sons of God would be revealed. Why? So that we would know who we are, so that we would walk, that we would command the storms to be still, that we would hush the waters, that we would say to deception, get lost, that we would open the eyes of the blind. And it's not just a physical thing, that we would stop people being in delusion. They're under a mass delusion now, whether it be UFOs, UAPs, whether it be any form of ism that you want to take your pick of out here in beautiful Asia. So yeah, I want to see people wake up. I want to see people come to know Christ. Just like Paul. Paul says the mystery revealed, kept for thousands of years, is Christ in you, the hope of glory, or God's glory, the hope of God. You know, that's what I want to see, people to wake up. It really upsets me and vexes me and makes me want to cry sometimes when I see the things that I see in a particular area, in a particular location. You know, it saddens me. I want people to wake up. Sometimes I ask, how are we going to do it? I can't do it on my own. I've been hit left, right, and centre. Going back to that New Age event, after going out full gung-ho, it took its weight. The bee will sting, the dog will bite. Later, I had cancer. Then my mum passed away with cancer. When, you know, but by his wound, by his trauma, we are healed. God sent me to uni to become a therapist, and I can see that there's a lot of crossover between counselling and my understanding of Christ. Because when I went to university, I was reluctant. Hence, there's a book I'm writing called The Reluctant Counselor. It's a bit delayed at the moment, but that's fine. God's got other ideas. But the reason I was reluctant is because I thought I knew it all. Meaning, well, Christ is the answer. Of course he is. Yes, he is the answer. I get that. But it's about relationship, because it was people that wounded me. It was people that wounded us. Sometimes even the church will wound us. But it will be people that heal us. It will be through people that heal us, the ecclesia, through the body, through that rapture, through that rib, through that. That's the rapture. Christ revealed isn't just, yeah, he's coming back. but it's also Christ revealed coming back in us, through us.
Yes.
I'm getting passionate because I want this whole nation to hear it.
We have to be healed. Heal us. I mean, yeah, exactly. It's not just all about the physical of the coming back of Christ, but it's about him fixing our life mentally also, not just the physical. Absolutely.
It's a whole holistic approach from head to toe. You know, by his stripe we are healed. Suzo, salvation, you know, because we briefly spoke about angels earlier. I think in the book of Hebrews it says, are not angels ministering spirits sent to those who are to receive salvation? So it's kind of like, are not angels ministering spirits sent to those who are to receive healing, to receive an awakening of the knowledge of Christ? It's not given to angels to deliver the message, although it could be argued in the end times it will be so bad that angels will do it, but I'm not going to deviate. But it's meant for us to deliver the message of good news about Christ. And going back to that, healing is available mentally, physically, emotionally, through the knowledge of Christ. And sometimes, oftentimes, it comes through communion, communication, through fellowship, even through those who are not yet in the knowledge of Christ.
Yes.
I mean, the clothes we wear, non-believer made it, maybe. The food we eat, non-believer made it. It nourishes us. And sometimes we will need a therapist. We will need a counselor. We will need people with a heart of love that then point to Christ. When I went to uni, people got healed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They said to me, are you a conduit? I said, what's a conduit? I don't know this terminology. I said, it's Jesus. No, leave me alone. I put the spotlight on me. I didn't do a thing. I didn't heal his knee. That lady over there who couldn't conceive, and now she can, and she had twins. That was Jesus who healed her. You know, stuff like that.
Wow. And
there was something that happened at university that people could see that the Holy Spirit had landed. Mm-hmm. Now, going back to that question about delusion, I get it. I get that people want to be rescued. I get that people want attachment. But the image of God is, and I can't even say the word, you better help me out, Brad, anthroponic. Yeah, the image of God is man, okay? It ain't some ugly looking lizard thing, mm-hmm. You know? That is not the image of God, whether that be a fallen angel or a snake or whatever it is. I ain't got time for that. I don't even want to entertain it. Don't put your mind there. Don't study that nonsense. It's right. A distraction. And today, I'm talking about my testimony, ufology, yada, yada, yada. But we're distracted by many other things. People with trauma, people with wounds, they go to alcohol, they go to drugs, they go to sex, they go to gambling, they go to whatever. And I get that, because pain seeks comfort. I get that. Or it's a familiarity. That's what you grew up in. That's what you're seeking, that comfort. And there should be no judgment there. But even in the darkness, I think somewhere in Isaiah or Jeremiah, there is treasure in the darkness. Treasure in the darkness. So when people are lost or trapped, and I'm speaking to someone watching right now, you know who you are. You might feel that you're totally lost and totally in the darkness, and there's nothing for you that anyone can do. You've been to church, you've been here, you've been there, and you've been through all that legalistic entrepreneurship. But let me tell you something, Christ hasn't got you. He's there in the darkness with you. He loves you. He bled for you. You're one. I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. You know, ain't no one going to snatch you. You know who you are. You might think you're even deceived. All right, I get that. But you know what? Your destiny is to know that God isn't far out in the universe with his answer machine, or he's there in you, with you, walking with you, never going to give up on you. I just want people to know that there is Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And if you walk with God,
God will take you places. I have much to say, but I hope that, people will see that the mystery of Christ revealed, the hope of God's glory, God's hope, is that we're never separated from him, in the sense that, you might have messed up, he still got you. Just like with me when I was young, the stuff that happened to me, God said, you know what, I've got you. I was with you. Yeah, you made a mess, but your life's now a message.
Wow, I
don't
love
want to
that.
miss anything.
Your life may be a mess, but now your life's a message. I like that. I like that a lot.
I was teaching some students the other day of Jesus when he fell asleep on the boat. And these seasoned fishermen had seen it all, storms, high waves. And they were scared because these storms and waves were really kicking off. But Jesus was asleep. And they were traumatized for a moment. They woke up, going to drown. They were looking up at the storm, at the lights, at the thunder. He woke up and he says, shush to the waves, the Greek, and be muzzled to the storm. And then he said, where's your faith? Meaning, and let me just go back into Italian here. Hey, what are you waking me up for? You could have dealt with this yourself. You've been with me all this time. You saw the way I speak. You saw the way I command. You can hush the waves. You can tell the storm to be still. And sometimes, just like when Moses approached the ocean or the Red Sea, and the people were moaning, Moses was going to have a picnic, like, okay, God, it's what we're going to do, God. And God said to him, I'm paraphrasing, what are you calling out to me for? Have I not told you use your rod? The same rod that when you threw it down, turned into a snake and swallowed up the Pharaoh's demon worshippers' snakes. And incidentally, when Aaron threw his rod down, it didn't turn into a snake. It turned into a dragon. But that's another side story. You can look at that at the Hebrew. But my point is, we can command the waves and the winds and the storms, and we can command angels, and Jesus said we could, but I'm not going to go into that, to be released, ministering angels to those who are to receive salvation. And my God, does this nation need it? Can't do it on our own. 17 million people locked up in the People's Republic of Stockholm Syndrome. Gee whiz, dude. I love you, man.
Absolutely. Love you too, buddy. Man, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I'm so glad you have shared your testimony and what God has brought you through. And clearly he is working in your life just as he's working in everyone else's life too. And I'm so glad to hear that you came through this and finding the truth, and you are sharing the truth with so many other people through not only this podcast, but through your life as well. That's fantastic. And thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate it, Bradley. You're welcome.